I'm Janice Hostegger. After 3 decades in the marketing business and many years of being an entrepreneur, I've learned a thing or two about marketing. Join me as we talk about marketing, small business, and life in between. Welcome to my weekly marketing. Have you ever spent precious time putting together a social media post and had it get maybe 5 likes? Listen, I hear ya. You are not alone. Social media can be a challenge. But one of the most important social media tasks should take place way before we ever start going to the platform and doing any writing or taking any pictures. And that is a social media strategy. Determining your goals first is what will lead to success. For example, do you want your followers to learn to know, like, and trust you? Then maybe a mini bio post is what you should do. Or if you want to drive traffic to your website, then maybe offering a free download is what will help. Having a strategy written out with a plan to achieve your goals will keep you from staring at a blank screen, or maybe worse yet, jumping right in and just posting whatever comes to mind. That's what I wanted to talk about today with social media expert Hanna Rauch. Hanna helps service-based businesses achieve authentic success that saves them time and brings in new clients consistently. She's worked with many businesses and knows what works and what doesn't work on social media. So here's my interview with Hanna. Well, hey, Hanna, how are you today?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. So tell me a little bit about your background and what you do and all the good stuff, how you got to this point in your life.
Yeah, so I'm Hanna. I'm originally from Italy, but I now live and work in New Zealand. Before I got to New Zealand, however, I did do some studies back home in Europe. I studied marketing. I first got into international marketing management, but then also into service and digital marketing, which is something that I think we'll talk about today as well. And that is one of my passions and interests. So I did that first and then moved across to Belgium to be with my partner, who is Belgian. And I studied some more marketing there at university. And after that, dove straight into my first full-time job in a market research company where I was working with people all over the world. We were doing mystery shops. So I was responsible for coordinating the mystery shops, and that meant I'm also quite versed at setting up surveys, looking at surveys and like helping people to fill them out correctly. So that's what I was doing there. But then at some point they asked me if I wanted to manage their social media pages as well, because they were like, well, you're a young person, you have a marketing degree, maybe you should be doing that. So I was like, why not? Let me just have a go at it. Mm-hmm. And actually quite enjoyed it right from the start because it's very creative and you get to interact with people. And yeah, I just found that was something that I wanted to do more of. So then I decided to just go out on my own and ask other businesses if I could manage their social media pages, basically.
Sure.
So I worked as a social media manager on the side. And after the pandemic, when I got back into my full-time job, I was like, actually, I just want to do the social media part of all of this. So I decided to set up my own business. And since 2020, I've been working with clients all over the world, first as a social media manager. And now I'm moving more into the strategic side of things. So I work with clients on their strategy. I do lots of consulting projects. I do a lot of one-on-one coaching with people as well. So business owners who still want to manage their own pages, but they just need a little bit of support and help in understanding how to do that effectively. I usually coach the business owner themselves, but sometimes also staff members if they already have someone like a VA or a graphic designer who could be taking over the social media aspect of the business as well, so that they don't have to hire an additional person. So that's something that I do as well. And otherwise, I do lots of workshops, master classes, and just love to connect with people on social media and get to know new ones.
That is very cool. I love that you have a background in the research part of it too, because I think that is so important to really understand the statistics behind not social media. Well, yeah, social media too, but marketing in general. I think I kind of geek out on the statistical part of it too. So I'm like, oh, that sounds so cool. But really, it does make a difference in how we run our campaigns. So many people are just don't look at the numbers, or they are, afraid of looking at the numbers, which I've been there myself. It's like, oh, it's going to be bad news, kind of thing. But I love that you started there. So, so clearly social media is kind of a passion of yours, I would think, right? Yeah. Yeah. So what do you see small business owners doing that, they could really benefit from maybe a little strategy? I know you mentioned strategy, and I think being a marketing strategist, I'm really big on strategy, right? So, I see a lot of people jumping into social media, especially without a real plan or any kind of guidelines. They just kind of start posting. So what mistakes do you see a lot of small business owners do on social media?
Yeah, I think what you mentioned already right now, that not having a strategy is probably the biggest mistake that a lot of business owners make. Strategy always sounds a little bit boring, and I think it's also a bit of a buzzword that a lot of marketers use online. They're like, you have to have a strategy, you have to have it, and business owners, they don't really care so much about it sometimes. So I think getting a strategy sorted in the first place is the first step that you need to take. I always like to think of a strategy just like a recipe, right? So if you have this new dish that you're wanting to try, of course you can go ahead and just try to guess the ingredients, how much you need for each of the ingredients and what the process is going to be. And maybe it's going to turn out all right. But it could also happen that your kitchen is on fire and you don't end up having anything to eat at all. So that is what happens when you don't have a strategy. You basically just guess what's going to happen. But if you do take the time to set up a recipe or look up a recipe and then follow that, you can get almost guaranteed results and you'll have something to eat at the end. So I always like to compare that to a social media strategy as well. If you know what you're going to be doing, it's much easier to follow that plan and actually achieve the goals that you're wanting to achieve. So I think the biggest mistake is always not having a strategy. And from that on, we have a lot of other mistakes that come from that, like not being consistent, because obviously you don't really know what you should be posting. So it becomes a big effort to think of content ideas each week. So that means then you're not going to be very consistent, which then obviously is not something that the algorithm is very happy about. That also means that we don't have consistency in our messaging. We might not even know who our target audience is. And I think that's important when you talked about market research as well. That is something that I really, really love to get stuck in, with like figuring out who are we targeting, what are their problems, and not just focus on things like the basic demographics. Like, yes, my ideal client, she's female, she's 30 years old, she has 2 kids, and she lives in Texas. Like, okay, that's great, but 30-year-old women can be so different from one to the other, right? Like, they have different interests. They might be having different hobbies, different struggles, different goals. So I don't really like to focus on these demographics, but rather look at how do they like to behave? What are they interested in? And most importantly, obviously, what are they struggling with? And how can we as a business help solve that problem? So I think that is also a big mistake that comes from the first mistake of not having a strategy set up.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Before I work with any client, we talk about that target customer and that avatar. Like you said, like you're absolutely right. A lot of times we'll say, we may have a vague idea about who our our target customer is. But we're afraid to get too specific. But when we get really specific, when we're writing to that one person, that one best customer on social media, they will take notice. And not just on social media, but in all of their marketing, you write differently if you're writing to somebody, if you're writing to a friend versus writing to the masses, for example, which is what people often will do in emails and such. You get totally different results from that writing, and you get totally different results from, putting it out there. I mean, people respond differently to it. So, I love that you start with that. Let's talk a little bit more about the strategy, because I think people struggle. At least I know that clients that I've worked with have the difference between strategy and tactics. Like I tend to explain it to them like the strategy is like the framework of a house, and the tactics are like bricks or something. I mean, that was just my little analogy, but I think. I think with strategy and social media, especially, it's easy to get into like, oh, what should I post today? Oh, how about a quote? Or here, I'll post myself pouring coffee, or, whatever. But the strategy behind that is what's really important. It's like, why are you posting that in the first place? What is it that you were trying to achieve? And, is it getting people to your website? Is it the know, like, and trust factor? Is it awareness, consideration, compare, evaluation, sales, follow-up? I mean, there's so many things that we need to do in marketing. And if you start breaking that down, those tactics are very different, right? Rather than if we just jump right in and start posting something, post to post.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think the difference between having this overall strategy and having, I always like to think of it as a roadmap, a plan of where we're wanting to go and how we're going to get there. And the tactics are more your everyday decisions, right? So like, what are you going to post maybe? But that is always something that you can refer back to the strategy and look at the strategy and be like, oh, okay, right. This was my plan. How can I put this into practice? And how does that influence these everyday actions? And I think a lot of business owners here go wrong, and they follow these big Instagram gurus that talk about these tactics, and they will go down a rabbit hole of following hack after hack without actually having a strategy. So someone might say, you need to post reels every single day. Okay, that might be great for you, but if that's not someone else's strategy, that won't work for them. So you have hundreds of tips on Instagram, and they might not all be relevant to you. So unless you have a strategy, you won't be able to see, is this relevant for me or not? Is this going to work for me? Or maybe it's just working for this particular Instagram guru. So that's why I think the strategy is so important, because then we can also understand which tips are relevant that are being given and which ones aren't.
Yeah, I love that. You're talking, you're singing my song. I love talking strategy, because it really is, it makes a difference between marketing that does well, any kind of marketing, and marketing that does not. So it's not sexy, but it's so necessary. And, I'm so glad that you focus on that. So do you jump on social media trends when they come out?
I think yes and no. I have to say I'm not a big fan of the trend, or like of the concept of picking up every single trend, especially if we're talking about TikTok trends or reel trends. I think they do have a place in our content, but only if it makes sense, again, for our overall strategy.
Right.
I think we're going to be talking about this all episode long. But yeah, it's just like, you need to understand if this is relevant to your brand. And I often see businesses, they don't really have the strategy. They don't really have a plan. So they see a trend and they're like, right, I can post this, because they didn't really think of what they were going to post that week in advance. So they're just like, kind of like a reaction to something rather than being proactive and saying, I'm going to be posting this, this, and this. And then we end up with profiles that are full of these trends, and they might be entertaining. Your audience might have a laugh when they see it. They might find it funny. But the problem is that it's going to be very difficult to monetize that kind of content for you as a business. So you can post these things, but you need to keep in mind that they are probably not the kind of content that is going to make you sales in the end. So I think keeping that in mind, I see lots of business owners who jump on every single trend and then they come to me for an audit and they're like, why am I not able to make sales from my Instagram? Well, because you're not posting content that is relevant to your audience in that sense.
Do you find that, posting a reel, say with a trending audio, or there was a while back when Instagram just was promoting reels. So everybody jumped on the reel bus, not promoting reels, but putting them in the feed more frequently. Do you find that is kind of necessary in some cases, though, to get to kind of work the algorithm a little more and get in the feed? Or, how much of that do you actually implement in your own business and with your clients?
I think it always depends on the business. And obviously, this is always the answer marketers like to give. It always depends. But I think the main thing here to consider is what is the message of the content that you're wanting to convey. So for example, if you have a product and you're listed in a supermarket and you're wanting to show your clients or your customers where they can find you, you're going to be able to convey that message much better with a video rather than just a photo of the shelf in a supermarket. So if you can make a video where you're walking through the store and you're showing people, look, we're at this supermarket and this is where you can find us, that's much more appealing and gets your message across much better than if you do a photo. So I always like to take that approach of thinking, how can I convey my message? If that's with a video, and with a lot of things, it will be video because it's just visual, and a lot of people like that visual content more than just a photo or maybe like a carousel post. So if that's easier to convey your message through video, then go ahead and do more videos. But I don't think it's necessary for every single business to focus strongly on videos. You might have a business that benefits from doing lots of carousel posts. That's usually what I do. And I will sprinkle in a reel here and there of my podcast or where I talk to the camera, or if there is a trend that I like and that fits with my brand and where I have an idea, I will put it on there as well. I'm not completely against using trends, but I think it's just a bit of giving your followers a variety of content and not just having this like strong focus on I need to make video content all the time, just for the sake of making video content. But then again, obviously videos do get a little bit more reach than your average carousel, because of that visually appealing aspect of them. And because people come to Instagram because they want to be entertained most of the times. And again, it depends a bit on the type of business. If you're marketing to other businesses, it might be a bit different. But if you're marketing to the end consumer, then people will come to the platform to be entertained, to relax a little bit, to watch some videos, and your chances are bigger of reaching them if you do video content in that sense. But then again, it needs to be good video content. You can't just hop on every trend, use the trending audios. And my biggest pet peeve right now with people making videos where it just says something like, this is how I made $1 million in 3 months. And then you're waiting for the info and then they're like, read the caption. And like, I hate those videos. It's just so much like clickbait. And I'm not a big fan of them. So to answer your question, it always depends. It can be beneficial, but I think you don't need to force yourself to do video content just because Instagram likes video content, because there's lots of people on the platform as well who love carousel posts as well. It always depends on your audience again.
Absolutely. So I was looking around on your website and you have a quote on there. It said, since I started marketing my social media services in 2020, 90% of my clients have found me on Instagram. That's
Mhm.
amazing. Is that still the case?
Yeah, I would think so. I do go to local networking events once in a while, but I would say that most of my clients find me on Instagram. And it's really
Okay.
interesting because a lot of business owners are amazed by that. But I think it's great for me because I guess it shows that I know what I'm doing. So
Right.
people
Yes.
always say like, even a few weeks ago, I was at an event and someone said, "Do you have any business cards?" And I said, "To be honest, I don't." Because most of my clients find me on Instagram. They're like, really? Like, I've never had clients from Instagram. So I'm like, yeah, probably because you're not using it very effectively. So yeah, I think either Instagram, LinkedIn nowadays works really well too, and local Facebook groups as well. So small business Facebook groups where you either just post or you just reply to questions and see how you can help people. That usually works quite well as well.
I've had a lot of success with Facebook groups, not my own groups, just meeting clients inside Facebook
Yeah.
groups. Because you're right, if you're helpful in there, people are going to notice, they're going to pay attention,
Mm.
and there's something about being inside a group too. It I don't know if it feels safer, but
Yeah.
people seem to reach out more readily than they would just on social media in general. It's kind of
Mm.
an interesting thing, but.
Yeah.
So, do you post the same content on each platform? So, do you post on the same content on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook's, whatever,
Mm,
et cetera?
yes and no. So obviously my messages will be the same. So I will talk about the same kind of topics, but the format might be different. So I might post a reel on Instagram and on TikTok, and then I might use the script of that as a post for LinkedIn, for example. So I do like to experiment a little bit and see what kind of formats work on each platform. But in general, yes, I will try to repurpose as much content as I can because I'm not a content machine and I don't want to have to think of 20 different posts each week. So I like to use what I can and adapt it to each of the platforms.
Do you post them on the same day, or do you stagger it a little bit and kind of mix it up?
Usually, yes. But I think it depends a bit because on LinkedIn, for example, I find that people see posts even like 2 or 3 weeks after sometimes. Depends a bit on how often they are actually on the platform as well. So I
Mm-hmm.
will usually post it on the same day, maybe at different times. Like if I were to post a video on Instagram on Friday at 6 p.m., I would probably schedule it for Friday morning on LinkedIn because I know that people are probably not going to check LinkedIn in,
Right.
during the weekend or so. So
Yeah.
that's kind of trying to keep that in mind and trying to think of when your following or your audience might be online and seeing it then. But usually I try to kind of do it on the same day or the day after because sometimes I find that people see a piece of content on Instagram and they might also be following me on LinkedIn. So then they might see it there again. And that is then when they decide to engage or something. So it kind of acts a bit as a repetition, as a little bit of a reminder as well. They're like, all right, yeah, I saw that post, but I didn't have time to read it. I might read it now. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, because I know a lot of people always are afraid that they will annoy people if they post about the same things over and over again or like on different platforms. But I don't think that's actually the case unless you're really bombarding your audience with
Right.
content.
Right. Right. I mean, I've heard differing opinions about this, but yeah, in marketing, I think there's an adage. I don't think it's a hard and fast rule about 7 touches that you want
Yeah.
to show somebody your brand, or they have to see it 7 times before they're going to react to it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a great way of doing it is just, share on the different platforms that you're on, assuming that you can keep up with them so that you're not,
Yeah.
trying to juggle all the platforms all the time, especially if you're a solopreneur. Sometimes that can be really challenging to keep them all
Yeah.
going.
Exactly. And I think that is also something that business owners often underestimate. They think, well, I can be on all the platforms, right? So they post very frequently on all of them for like a month or so, and then they are completely exhausted because, like you say, it does take a lot of effort and it does take a lot of time, especially if you're just by yourself in your business. So then they're like, no, this is way too much effort. And then they completely disappear again for a month or two. And then they get up some more energy and they come back and they do the same thing over and over again. So I think I totally agree. If you can sustain multiple platforms, then go ahead and do that. But sometimes it's also good if you just have one or two and focus on those and don't go crazy on all the different platforms and just be average on all of them.
Right. Because your target customer is probably not on all the platforms, or at least not frequently, for sure. So have you been using AI tools on social media?
This is a
curious.
question that I get quite frequently, actually, especially like in workshops and with business owners who are time poor. And they see the appeal of AI and they're like, should I be using AI? And I have a little bit of a divided opinion on it, I want to say. Yes, I'm using AI tools, but I don't think I'm using them as like how most people would be using them for their social media. So I think a lot of people use them to write captions. So they would type in something like, write a caption for a post for, I don't know, a beauty business or something. And that's unfortunately what I see with a lot of businesses. I can immediately see if someone used AI.
Yes.
The kind of structure and how AI writes captions is very distinct. And if you've played around with AI a little bit, you can easily spot that. So I think a lot of people are trying to make content creation easier by using these AI tools, but they actually sacrifice the quality of the content for it. So yes, it's great if it saves you time, but if you pay for it with not having great content, which then means you're not going to generate sales from that, then is it worth not investing that time? I'm not sure. So I think I do like to use AI tools to refine things, maybe also to spark ideas in the beginning. So if I'm like, I really don't know what I should be posting this week, you can type in something like, what is something that a lot of business owners are looking for right now on social media, for example. And that might spark some ideas, and then you can go take these ideas and develop them further. But that's something that a lot of people are not doing. They just copy right from the AI into their social media, and then it all sounds very generic and doesn't really represent their brand as much. So I think you need to be careful with that. But I'm not completely against AI, because if we're honest, there are quite a lot of tools out there that do make our lives a lot easier if we use them.
Right. Yeah. And I haven't used a lot of AI, but I do use it, like you said, as like an idea generator, especially for subject lines, or if you just can't think of words someday, especially at the end of the day, I'm just thinking, oh, I've got to write something here, but I'm stuck, and ChatGPT or some of the others will kind of help you out in that respect. But you're absolutely right. There are certain words that ChatGPT and sentence structure that they use that I can spot it right away. And I've just been hiring, or went through a hiring process. And there are some resumes where you can tell they literally copied and pasted the entire thing off ChatGPT because the background on there is a certain color and the font is a certain color. And I just thought, this isn't good necessarily. But
I think that also leaves a bad impression then, right? For you as someone who wants to hire someone, that makes it look like you really didn't want to put any effort into this application. And I think it can be great to like maybe give you a first draft of something. Like what I see a lot of people do is they have the job description and they copy paste it into the AI and they're like, write a resume or like write a cover letter about this. And then you can immediately spot that they picked certain words from the job description, and it's just not a really great impression. So I think if you want to use it as a first draft, that might be great to just give you some ideas maybe on how you can formulate certain sentences. But if it doesn't sound like you in the end, maybe it's better if you don't use it.
Yeah. Yeah. It didn't leave a good taste in my mouth, honestly, especially when they didn't bother to, clean it up. And, it was so obvious what they'd done, but it was actually kind of humorous. But no, those people didn't even get interviews, unfortunately. But so for someone just starting out on social media, or for someone that's maybe let their social media accounts gather dust, what do you recommend for re-energizing their accounts? Kind of talking to myself here too with some of these.
Asking for a friend, right?
Yes.
Well, I think the first thing would probably be, if you originally had a strategy, reviewing that strategy. If you didn't have a strategy in the first place, having a bit of a look at where am I right now? Where do I want to go in the future? So what are my goals? And I know goal setting also always sounds a little bit boring, and it also sounds a bit arbitrary. You're like, I want to reach 2,000 people. Like, okay, that's a bit random, but it's still a good idea to set yourself some goals, because then you can also see if you're getting there at least. And obviously something like a plan, we want to have it, but at the same time, it's also there to be changed, right? We want to go back to it and see, are we on track? No, we're not. Okay, we need to change the plan and make it happen. So I think in that case, I would definitely even just sit down, have a little bit of a brainstorm, see what I been doing in the last few weeks or months, and where do I want to go from here? And then you can come up with a little bit of a plan. It doesn't have to be like an elaborate strategy or anything, but just a bit of a plan that you can commit to, that you can say, well, in the next 3 weeks or in the next month, I want to post 2 times a week or 3 times a week. And here I would focus on getting on track first before you bombard yourself with tasks. So don't immediately start with 6 posts a week and an Instagram live and stories every day, because then you're going to be overwhelmed and you're probably going to stop posting again in a few weeks' time. So just stick to a simple plan and commit to it. And I know saying just commit to it is obviously easier said than done, but I think you need to just agree with yourself on this and say, I'm going to make it work, because content creation is hard. It takes a lot of effort. It's not something that comes naturally to a lot of people either. So you just need to, come to an agreement with yourself and say, we're going to commit to this and we're going to make it work. And I think what can help with actually sticking to that plan is to have a minimum viable option for each of the tasks. For example, if you say, I want to show up on stories every second day for the next month, what is the ideal version of that? So what does that look like? Maybe have like a story sequence of 5 slides where you talk to the camera, where you promote something, I don't know. And what is the minimum viable option here? So that could be a selfie from your desk. That is something that you can do every single day. Or even just a photo of your cup of coffee and saying what you've been working on today. So I think that's important to have that kind of minimum viable option that you can stick to even on those days when you're really busy and when you're really not feeling like posting on social media or doing something. So that helps you to stick to a certain routine and make it work in the long term as well.
I love that idea, the minimum viable option. I love that, because you're right. Sometimes you get into it and you think, you're having a great week and you're like, oh, okay, I'm on a roll now. I post it every day. And then life happens and you're just off the rails. And I got to be honest, I've been there. I've done that. It's frustrating because I have my goals, but then I have reality too, and that's absolutely true. You need to give yourself some grace sometimes and say, okay, this isn't realistic. I just know that life happens more often than it doesn't. So we need to decide on what are the non-negotiables here? Is it 3 days a week? Okay, I'm going to post 3 days a week then, or something like that. So great idea.
And I think also if that is your goal, if you're wanting to post 3 times a week, write out what needs to happen so that you actually post 3 times a week. Because often I think people have this idea of like, oh yeah, I want to reach 10,000 people, or I want to have 10,000 followers, but they don't visualize what kind of effort goes into that. So what do I need to do on a day-to-day basis to make that happen? Because once you see how much effort goes into reaching a goal like that, then you might say, well, actually, I know I cannot do that right now because of the workload that I have, because of what life throws at me. And then you can adapt your goal as well and make it a little bit more realistic. So I think that's a really important part as well. Like visualize what needs to go in every single day to make something happen.
Mm-hmm. And understand your reason for wanting to have 10,000 followers. I mean, because social media can take on a life of its own, and it can almost become a distraction from your business rather than the, means of bringing business in. So I agree. I think starting with that goal is a really good idea. How long should somebody wait to see how well they're doing? So, I mean, if let's say you've decided to post, 4 times a week and do 2 stories a week, how long should you wait to see whether or not you are actually getting traction?
It's a really good question. And I don't think there's a specific answer as to like 2 weeks time or 3 weeks time. But when I work with clients, we usually try to not change our strategy for like 3 months or something, like really be consistent and try to do it for 2 or 3 months before we start evaluating. Because what a lot of people do is they start posting and after a week, they're like, nah, this isn't working. They change strategy again or tactics in that situation. They do something different. They're like, no, this isn't working either. And they're just confusing themselves and everyone in their audience. So really try to stick to one thing that you're doing, one strategy that might be posting more in local Facebook groups, for example. So you could try that for 3 months and then really see, is this making a difference? Because often timeframes like a week or 2 weeks, they are not very representative for a longer period of time, right? For example, here in New Zealand, school holidays, I find, always throw everyone completely out of their business. And it's almost as if nobody has time for anything anymore because the kids are home. And I feel like in that week or 2, social media is also very silent. So I really see that in my social media posts as well, the kind of engagement I get. So if you were to try something for a week or 2 and one of these weeks falls into a school holiday time, then that is already not representative for the rest of the time period. So really try to do it for 2 months minimum and then have a look and evaluate. And then you can still change, but you will only see the effects of a strategy after a certain amount of time.
Love it. Well, I have learned a lot here, Hanna. Thank you so much for joining me today. And where can people find out more about you?
Well, the best place to find out about me is probably on my Instagram. That is where I usually like to hang out. I'm sure you'll put it in the show notes so people can find it. Or, of course, on my website as well, where they can find out about my services and everything. But yeah, Instagram is a place that I like to hang out the most. So if you have any questions or DMs, that is where I'll reply the fastest usually.
Perfect. Alrighty. Well, thanks again, Hanna. Have a great day.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Wasn't Hanna great? I love her reminders that strategy rules over tactics any day of the week. If you like this episode, please subscribe and share this with any business owner who is struggling getting traction with their own social media. Thanks for tuning in today. As always, I really appreciate you. See you next time. Bye for now.